Hello and welcome to the Game Be Together Tech Roundtable on Saturdays, different times depending on where you are in the world, and we're doing mornings and evenings. This is our first kind of later in the day one. Um, so the plan for this, as usual, is we go around, talk about, give a little spiel about our project, short and sweet, and then we talk about things that we've accomplished, things that we hope to accomplish, and if we need any help. And then usually we try and find one or two people that are willing to be on what's called the hot seat. It's just a place where they talk more in depth about the challenges they're having and how we can all help them out. And outside of that, we can work on our on any combined projects we're working on. So, who would like to start us off with an update?
I could start. Solution raising this week, we held two. One was our usual one on Wednesday that we did on loneliness, which was very impactful. I enjoyed that one. And then the next day, Bentley and Carrie joined, and we had one on voting with your wallet with Mark Campbell. And they both, I think, went really well, as well as meeting with Carrie and Yvette before this conversation a few hours ago and coming up with things that are going to facilitate our three projects and something else that Carrie, remember, what is the starting with three. Starting with three, and I can't remember. What is it?
The culture of three starts.
Yeah, the culture of three. We starting with three. So clearly it rolls off the tongue because we can remember it. But because all three of us are concentrating on that, the culture of we, like the difference between I culture and we culture and what happens when we come together. So it's where our projects overlap. And so the culture of we, and then we were talking about three. So what came up was, yes, we're starting just conversations and seeing what comes out of that. So that is my week. I don't have anything to sit in the hot seat for. I think that is what is going to happen with the culture of we. And so I will pass it on to whoever else is next.
All right, I guess I can go next. So my project is WikiLection. It is a project to fight misinformation in politics, religion, and science. Politics, news, and science. I've been working with another person that shows up to these sessions, Matoush, and Bentley has been helping as well to get the first version of the prototype online. Got sort of the early days version online, and now we're working at adding the part to track legislation and voting, and then we'll continue to expand it. There's also been sort of a side project that may or may not involve a bunch of other people, which is the other side of that. Currently I'm calling it Conferati, and that is more for the organization side. And that hasn't technically started, but kind of has, because it's just going to end up being the other side of the same sort of piece of software that is running the WikiLection prototype. But I've been working with Matoush on that, and there hasn't been too much progress in the last 2 weeks because we've been getting caught up on Upwork. And my next step is to work on some of the sample data for the legislation. So nothing terribly exciting.
Okay, we started with, I've realised we've got 3 projects, well, 4 now on the go, but they all kind of pile into the bigger picture. So hope to build a website, and as a bit of an idiot because I've got to change the name server, so that's put me back a day or so. Third place stuff, I need to build business plans for that, which I'm still in the process of gathering information. And I realised, because I like doing crochet and stuff, but I realised last week that I could probably start Bad Nana Beans as a collective for crochet and crafts and stuff like that, and see where that goes. And then, as Jubilee said, the culture of we starts with 3. So I had a real good chat with Yvette and Jubilee today, and that feeds into the bigger picture, and hope it'll lead to a lot of solidarity and a lot of helping each other out and building success into sort of like all the projects, and not just for us but for everybody else as well. So I think, and I might be getting into story about oral history project, story project, that's probably in the offing. And plus the fact that an audio play, what I had an idea for, managed to find a producer to turn it into sort of like a podcast series. So I'm really excited about that, and other stuff that's coming up that I did ages ago that I thought was dead is getting resurrected, which is even better. So yeah, fingers in lots of pies.
All right. So I was working on Reason Score, but starting to realize, even though I kind of built the project, I don't know that I have the stamina to put in a lot of the data. And I think people, I think if there's not some certain amount of data in there already, I'm not sure people would participate. I'm not even sure that people would be, most people would be adding in data just because it's such a, it's more, I think people want it to mostly be done by experts, and then they would come in and add their 2 cents. So I'm considering hiring someone to do some kind of internet research and maybe hold my hand while we enter some data into the system and see how it works. I still think the process is good, but it just it's so thought intensive. I think reading it's easy, but writing it's hard. It's kind of like writing a book. You know, it can take some people up to a year to write a book, but it only takes you 10 hours to read or whatever. And then I was also kind of inspired by our talks about systems where people can rate and review and kind of choose things based on that. So it encompasses food and politics and software. So I've been thinking about a kind of a core open source software that would facilitate all those use cases. That would be kind of a no code, easy startup, easy thing to start maybe. And also building tools that are kind of like no code, but Jubilee's kind of talked in the past on how, you know, it's great that there's all this open source software, but unless you have a programmer, you often can't start it. And there's a couple tools nowadays where you can't actually click a button, it'll load it up to a host of your choice, and then you just have to pay that host for hosting costs, and then you can adapt it. But a lot of those are very host specific, so I'm trying to make a generic one that'll work in, you know, where you can do it with a small hosting company or with Amazon or Microsoft or whoever you want. So I've been writing up documentation on what I think to do that, and then maybe we'll have a meeting next Friday to go through the with voting with your wallet sort of thing, which is just one aspect. I need to be careful I don't try and change what anyone's trying to do by trying to generalize it too much. Yeah, so I've been kind of thinking through that process, and I'm trying to think I might want to get a part-time job because I'm kind of losing steam on all my projects, and I think it'd be nice to have someone hand me some work I could do for a little while rather than having to every day figure out what I need to do and make a little cash and extend this experiment. But I don't know. That's what I've been thinking. So I guess I didn't really say what Reason Score does, and I don't know if we all kind of did that, but it's a mass agreement tool, so it helps people find agreement on contentious issues through evidence and reason. So yeah, that's it for me. I was thinking maybe when we do this in the future, maybe we could just decide to go clockwise from the top, because I think we're all in the same position. We have Jubilee at the top, Adriel, and then Carrie, and then me. Does everyone else see that same clockwise from the top left?
Yeah, you're under me, right, Bentley?
Yeah. The only problem is I think
Okay,
if I point this way, I'm pointing at Carrie, aren't I?
No,
Is it the other
you
way?
got to point this
Okay.
way. You gotta point
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
because of the
it's
camera
mirrored. I
difference.
tried to mirror it, but I forgot.
There,
No,
yeah.
yeah, you're right. Okay, so she's over there.
Jubilee, yeah, okay, so it's that.
Yeah.
Easy.
It's true because if I go like that,
I
I'm
guess
like the
that
wrong
was
way.
awkward.
It's always fun to play with the mirrors on this one.
Yeah,
that was one of the things that ended up with like point at
sometimes
Adriel.
they'll flip it
No,
for
wait.
you, but not for anyone else. But this one, it's good. Yeah, okay. It is not mirrored for me. And some of the tools, they'll mirror yours so it looks less weird, but then the whole angles get off. Yeah. So I don't know if I have anything for the hot seat. I mean, I'd like to talk about that surveying tool, but I don't want to design it too much without the other participants. But yeah.
And when you say surveying tool, is that the vote with your wallet thing?
Yeah.
Oh, it just muted you for some reason.
Yeah, community review.
Okay.
Community rating. Rating's probably a better word.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with, and I think we can sort of talk about that because we have a level of talking about that affects all of our projects, and then there will be a level on Friday where it's about a specific project, and we can sort of talk about what that's trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think there's so many projects about sort of community review, and that's definitely a core part of WikiLection. And so it might be sort of like if you're interested in building sort of like a tool that could work for multiple things, in theory, we could just say, hey, what would, Reason Score and WikiLection need to be able to use this? So we have a starting point, and then when we talk about this other project, how does that fit into?
Mm-hmm. So, Carrie, did you have anything that you especially want to be on the hot seat about? I know Jubilee said she didn't. So.
I haven't got anything specific. It's more about asking yourselves.
Is that the who?
Right, in terms of, well, yeah, it's that, but I'm going to do it with Jubilee first, and then I'll come for the Boy Scouts. Because you'll be the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
What I'd like to know, right, in an ideal world, and your projects are up and running, right, do you have a number of people in your head that you might be wanting to be using this as a, I don't know, like Bentley, would you be creating a community around your Reason Score? And also, Adriel, would you be creating a community around your WikiLection? And if so, how many people would you like to see in each, whether it be a community that gets that gravitates around that? And obviously you've got the big wide world, which is full of people, but there'll be maybe a community that gravitates around your project.
Right.
Doing what's done. And as I said, I'm just looking because I know Jubilee's after 10,000, right? So that's that bit. But you two, I'm not too sure how many people you'd want to sort of like gravitate toward. What would be an ideal community size in terms of people would you have around your project?
Yeah, I think for mine, it would end up being different levels of involvement, kind of like probably Wikipedia, where there's sort of some people that actually like go and spend a lot of time on it and geek out. I mean, occasionally change a few things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the people who like there's that guy who's I think published like 10,000 or 100,000 articles or some insane number like that. And then there's just the regular user that might just find a Wikipedia page when they Google something and they go there and look at it and then they move on. So I think oh hey, Matoush is here even though it's quite late for him. So I think on the community side, the like end users, the end goal is for that to be like in the billions because it's
right,
that's
okay.
like a global political thing. That's way down the road. I think realistically, if it were to get let's say 10,000 like core users, that would be awesome. That would probably actually be I think close to the numbers that if it were really successful, that would probably be around the core number of users, like somewhere between 5,000 and 50,000. And then you might get into like the tens and hundreds of thousands for like the dabblers, people, who would go in there and check things out and occasionally like throw a rock at something and be like, hey, is that right? Or, some form of a comment. But
right. So in terms of contributors, right, how many people would you like in terms of contributors?
I mean, that's where it gets weird because just on the political side, probably in the thousands, where it would probably end up being like, maybe 100 or a couple hundred in Canada, and then easily into the thousands in the US, and it would probably be split to different countries.
Right. Okay.
When it comes to like the discussing evidence side, definitely in the thousands.
Right. Okay. Nice.
Or or into the many thousands, because if we're talking about like people discussing science and people discussing the various economics, the goal is for it to be a fairly large number of people who are qualified in that area. And then, if each of them reviews anywhere from 10 to 100 studies, you could end up getting a pretty good breadth of knowledge being reviewed.
Okay, right. Okay. How about you, Bentley?
So, Reason Score is kind of a generic tool, so there might be several communities using it for different purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But if we kind of narrow it down to maybe like the Gollybot use of it, Gollybot being a public character that helps people make decisions on a society-wide basis, like, is global warming something we need to work on, or should we send our kids back to school this season while we're in the middle of a pandemic or at the end of a pandemic? So for that, I mean, I would imagine it would be fairly successful if we had 1,000 contributors,
Right.
and then tens of thousands of readers.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be a fairly good start for
Okay,
that specific piece. Yeah.
Right. Okay, because I was just trying to get a feel for kind of numbers. You know what I mean? See how we would need to collect for you. Collect and keep.
As awesome as you are, Carrie, you're definitely not on the hook for getting 10,000 people. That's a lot. We're only expecting 1,000 from you. Mateusz, do you want to give your update and let us know what you're up to?
Not too much. I had a very chaotic week, so I did some stuff, but it wasn't much. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. And it's the same for didn't do much for week election as well. I intend to catch up this weekend. I mean, when I finish what I am doing right now, tonight, tomorrow night, to close this week on positive note and implement what got into this document for improvements. So that would be my goal. And for Hyperlogos, I need to write a description, a manifesto. I can. It's not. It's only adjacent to Game B, so I can write a manifesto. And yes, and something like a description, so it can be presented on the first as kind of a landing page for the project, because right now it has no landing page at all. It displays weird stuff when you enter it. So that's it.
Thanks. I think, Bentley, we were going to have you in the hot seat. We can, or unless Mateusz had something. I think did we answer your question fully, Carrie, or did you have more? That was.
Oh yeah, I just Mateusz, right? So see, when you get Hyperlogos on the go, how many people would you like to be involved in terms of contributing
to the code base or to the
well just to the project? Maybe, I don't know, using it or helping other people using it, or do you envisage a community being built up around the Hyperlogos? Because that's the kind of thing I'm looking at.
I would expect the Hyperlogos itself as a generic software to have just a few, because that's the way with open source projects. So I definitely do not expect many. On the other hand, on specific instances of it, when there is a subject or a purpose to the given instance, I would expect tens to hundreds.
Right. Okay.
But if I have even a 10, that would be I consider it a success.
Okay.
Mateusz, do you see there being kind of a public group one that's kind of open, or do you think there'll always be a specific instance?
I have an idea.
Because I
The
think
big
that's the
idea
one that
is
Carrie would that's the community I think Carrie would be focusing on.
yes, there will be something like this, ideally, because for in the initial stage there would be instances only, each instance with specific purpose and theme and so on. But a public instance to gather them all in one big tree of information. That's something I would like to have in unspecified future. So yes, it would be like a tree of trees and something containing descriptions and links to all instances that are public and within the same scope. Like if the scope is improving the world and there are 10 or whatever, however many specific instances for specific purposes, this one public instance would be the main landing page and source of initial information, sending users to specific branches, so to speak.
Do you also maybe?
So what we need a forest. Get you a forest.
Forest. Run forest. Yeah.
Do you envision one of these for like the Game B community, or is it more specific than that? Okay. So if we had the Game B community, that would be a couple hundred people maybe participating, or 100.
Looking at it, actively adding information to it. If I have 10 people actively adding information, given how in our environment, in the context of everything being voluntary, then it's not as easy.
Yeah.
Unless there is some incentive involved, not in form of money, but like rewards points, like in Warcraft you have pieces of gold, so it could be something like this, slight gamification of this project. Who knows? I don't like the word and I don't like the idea too much, but then again, this is how human minds work. So yeah. But we see. We are far away from the stage.
From that, yeah.
Is there a way to easily start? This would be more in Carrie's wheelhouse, but start collecting people who want to volunteer. They don't necessarily, right? Like everyone who joins projects either has a project or wants to be part of a project. Everyone who joins Game B is basically has a project or is looking for a project. None of our projects are at the space where someone can just come in and be part of it at the same level we are. All of them could use labor, right? All of them could use, especially with the data entry. And I feel like data entry is something that's fairly accessible to most people, depending on what it is and how complex it is, that most people, if they knew about it, would want to give some time. And so there's what Bentley had said, where he's going to pay people to do it. And both there's people who are like, oh yeah, let's pay people in Venezuela to do data entry. I'm willing to put $50 towards that, knowing it's going to be maybe, like 10 hours worth of work or whatever. That there's funders to pay for outsourcing, especially if it's for a bigger mission. And then also people who volunteer. Anyway, just the volunteer part. Like if people, when they come in, or like it's like, yes, here's an email list. So if they're part of that email list, they know they're going to get spam from people who are like, hey, we need volunteers for X right now. And once technology reaches the point, then of course it's not an email list and it's a much more fluid way to get those volunteers and to find out, is it an in-person volunteer, is it data entry? Can I do it in what 5-minute opportunities are there right now that I could just do something right now? But that, like, there's enough people interested that it's not future. It is kind of now. Like but I don't know whether doing any of that work would get us crickets anyway. Yeah, I really want to help. And then you send out the email, even if we had 50 people, would anyone show up? I don't know. We just moved this one to 2 p.m. Poor Matouche, it's like the middle of the night, and it's still just the 5 of us. We'll do one more week of this and see.
Well, I live in time zone like Spain. Spain is 1 hour ahead. Even further, not quite US, but somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. No, not Pacific Ocean.
Well, I think
okay, it's officially late.
I think if you had sort of like a database of kind of like who wants to do what, where and when more, but like rather than just having a list of saying, "Oh, this is what we're doing," but like you'd need,
sorry,
you would need to have people who would actually wanting to do it, not just saying that they want to be part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's like the tech side of like, yes, it'd be great to have, I can put all of my interests, all of my specialties, everything in. And it would be like, I want it to go out to just the coders or just the this, but we're not at that level. The technology's at that level. I'm saying like literally an email list. It's like, hey, you said you wanted to volunteer. You said you want to be part of like Game B or Game B projects. Yes, this is happening on this day. We need people. This is your call in. And even if we got one, that'd be great. The issue is how much work goes into any kind of output.
Right. It definitely sounds like that would end up being something that if the knack tool were good, it could have ended up doing, and the tool that the Drupal site that Carrie's working on sounds like it could pretty easily turn into that. I'm wondering if there's value in doing it off of software first. Like we've sort of tried maybe different versions of this in the Game B projects group, but even saying like in this meeting, for the people who have projects that need work, to decide on exactly what work is needed, start to put that out in like a weekly call out to the group saying, hey, if you're looking to help with a project, here's 5 things that we need help with. P.S. If your project needs help, feel free to add a comment here, and we'll try to like figure out how to keep that one updated, where it's, I guess, similar to like the weekly status update, but instead of it being a status update, it's who needs help and who's willing to help. And knowing that the first, like using a comment thread in Facebook, that's going to be super messy if it actually takes off. But at that point, that's a good problem to have.
So some other options would be email lists. So pretty easy to set up as a Google group. And then we could post the link to sign up for that. And anyone who wanted could sign up. And then anyone in that group could send an email to the whole group. So until it gets spammed, it would be good. Then there's other things like Substack, and I can't remember the name of the other one, where it's free as long as you're not charging for the email list, and then that'd be more like they could sign up, and then we could a specific person or group of dedicated people could then send out emails to you. And maybe it'd be worth setting up a one-pager somewhere for Game B or on Carrie's site or on the wiki that says, here are the email lists to get notifications about volunteering or new projects or something like that, rather than having to hope that you see it in your Facebook feed or remember to go look. So those are some options. I don't know what people think of that.
It seems like there's 2 types of volunteers, one of which is like very particular, right? I need someone who knows coding, which luckily we have a lot, but like still it's a very particular, right? I know to go to Matouche or Bentley, but like no, the rest don't know. But also the call outs for like literally anyone can do this, right? Like that's a little bit me and my solution. I say like, just come. I don't feel like you're an expert. Just come, you have a life. That there's no requirement, and therefore like if you can read and write numbers, you can probably do data entry, especially if it's repetitive and you're having multiple people enter the same thing, so it can check off each other. But yeah, an email list for just the very low barrier volunteering of like, yes, we want dozens of people doing data entry, and growing that also becomes a source of like, we're not emailing you unless it's a good project, not just anyone gets the email for volunteer. And then that becomes a reason people come and join anyway, and to be part of that, if there's people on that list that want to volunteer.
Yeah, if we really wanted to curate it, I'd probably say using Substack or that other email one. Although I don't know, actually it may only be one person can send them out, so that may be too much of a barrier. I don't know if Google Groups supports you to where only certain people can send the emails or not. But yeah, it'd be something to look into. Do you really think that if we had that we do have people that are willing to?
No.
I mean, I've seen a couple of people.
I think there's there's nowhere to put them, right? Like, it's like people have asked me, like, what can I do for your project? I'm like, I don't even know. But if I had a way to be like, listen, sign up. I'm never doing a newsletter. I'll give you the newsletter, like sign up. And when there's a volunteer opportunity, you will find out about it. I can't even do it at that level, but it feels like Together Tech can do it at that level where it's like, hey, even if there isn't anything quite yet, I think we do have a MailChimp account, don't we, from like months ago? And something along those lines.
Well, I could set one up. I could set one up with what build it in to what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So that sounds that weird. Jubilee, can you mute yourself so I can? Yeah, it just sounded dead weird. So basically, I could probably build something in that would have somewhere for people to go and say, right, okay, we need this week, and just have it kind of like a notice board, and then we can post a link from the notice board, and then people with the projects and stuff like that can, we can link it towards the project and who's offering what, and then that would be an easier way, and then just post it every week and say, right, this week, and sort of like do a digest of, right, so and so's looking for this, I'm looking for that. I'll give us a hand with that. Because there's a lot of people who say they're looking for the project to get involved with, but they have I don't know what they'd want to do, because obviously you don't want to be saying, right, all these projects are needing help, but like, because some people might think of the help that's needed is a bit beneath them, you know what I mean? So I think I'd have to find out more about sort of like what people are needing, and that's why the chats were important. And have chats with people with the projects and finding out properly and what information they want out there, and whether they're wanting to have some space where they can sort of like just have things in together as well. You know what I mean? So as I said, we can start with us, because we've got enough projects to go with now, and then sort of like build it out. So everybody, and then because people can start seeing once tasks are done and once things are starting to move. And I think that would be good for people to see as well. You know what I mean? So I think that's all possible.
Well, I just don't know if it'll be effective unless they get a direct notification somehow. So a text, an email, a message through Facebook, but that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, well, as I said, we can look at that and build it in. I think with the CRM module, you can do kind of like a campaign or do a newsletter, or we can do a newsletter for them to sign up with, you know what I mean? And then that can take them straight to the page, and obviously we can send links for people to actually sign up if they want to, and we'll just take it from there, really.
Well, I mean, sending out emails and getting them delivered consistently will be difficult without either using SendGrid or MailChimp or Substack. So you can send it out from a base server, but until it's trusted, it'll show up in everyone's spams folder for the most part.
Yeah. In general, I'm not a big fan of email, just because the deliverability rates for email have been going steadily downhill for the last 20 years.
Well, we can develop a social media strategy then.
Well, no, I still think email is better. Deliverability is fine as long as you're using a known provider.
Right, yeah.
If you use SendGrid,
so yeah, I don't just mean like technical deliverability. I mean also like open rates.
Well, open rates are untrackable because a lot of the website, the Google blocks notifications, so the open rates are not accurate. And that's more based on the quality that people are sending in and whether people open the email. But I mean, I don't think there's a better option. It's bad, but I mean, what else? I mean, if anything else, it's like, well, let's just post in the Facebook group. That's everything else is the same as the Facebook group, and we're already doing that. So let's just be more intentional about it. But
like I would because we're close to asking people to go off-site for the Drupal tool. Personally, I'd want to sort of wait to use that request for the Drupal site, because if we're like, hey, go check out NAC, hey, go sign up here for the email newsletter, hey, go sign up for this, hey, go sign up for that, I think ends up creating a sort of fatigue. And it's not to say that that still won't happen with things like the Drupal site, but just to try to keep that to a minimum. And knowing that the Facebook option isn't great either, but it's just sort of like we've already got them there, and it's no extra step to action. It's just do they see it or not? And then the next time that we ask them, it's to sign up for this Drupal tool.
Well, yeah, but are we asking them? I don't think Carrie's suggestion was to have them sign up for the Drupal tool. What's the Drupal tool going to do with that sign up?
Well, as I said, it's just a case, right? It's just to basically, as I said, once we get the project lists and the ones some help that's needed, and we've got that sorted, so everybody knows what they want and what they need and what sort of help and what as I said, if we get that with the project, then we can post the link to the project page, and then because all the contacts will be there for that specific project, they can sign up to the person directly rather than having to sign up to the site, because they might not want to get involved in the back end of it. But as I said, I just see the back end of the Drupal as a site to where we can actually put all our stuff, and if there's plans and things, and you can have your own content and you can see what's going on, and other people can see what's going on as well. So it's just a kind of sort of like as I said, like a clubhouse. So you can, we can see what's what and maybe develop outwards. And as I said, there'll be some people who have a project who might want to come and play out with us and that. But not everybody's going to want that. So as I said, if I can get the project page where they go to find all the projects, we can set up fields about help and what's wanted and what's needed. So you can display the fields so they can just see that and where to contact the person directly if they want that, you know what I mean, and which groups, and give them more information if they need it. So basically we just put a link to the project page of all the projects so they can go and have a mooch through. And as I said, you can display it, whether help's wanted, help's needed, you know what I mean, and what status the projects are, and if somebody's just got ideas that they want to come along and talk to somebody about, they don't know, as I said, it's just a seed of an idea, but they want to help grow it, then if they want, they can come and join the back end of it. Because I think there's kind of nowhere, because it's out in the public, you don't really want people, if you've just got a seed of an idea, you don't know where you're going with it, you don't really want everybody looking at it and going, oh, you're an idiot, that'll never take off. But you want to be able to talk to somebody and talk through it with somebody. Then maybe we can do that in the back end of it, and then because as I said, it'll be you'll have to join to see that, but it'll be a safer place to kind of like an idea factory, something like that, where you can just bounce about and no matter how out there it is, you know what I mean, you're not going to get laughed out of town or ran out of town for having an idea that looks a bit mad, you know what I mean?
Right. I think what the question that I sort of heard Brantley ask and what led to this conversation, from my understanding, is, how do we get our Facebook audience to sort of, what's the step to start to drive this sort of action? And I think if we're saying that the next step is the Drupal tool, I don't think the first version will have everybody signing up for a member account.
Oh no, I'm not expecting
Benny's question. I think it probably starts out being just Carrie, and then the next step are the project owners, and then it just becomes sort of a portal where I, for WikiElection, can go say, here, what's going on with WikiElection. Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, here's what we need help with. And then there's some page on the site that just, if Bentley lists something and I list something, and Matoush and Jubilee and Carrie and everybody who has a project each lists 2 or 3 things that we need help with. There's just a page showing here's everything. Mm-hmm. And in the first version, they're probably it just says, if you want to participate, go reach out to that project then.
Yeah.
Then eventually we might get to the point where those people actually sign up for a member account and there's the whole idea ecosystem. But I think to answer Bentley's question, in the start, they wouldn't sign up. It would just be go there and read it. And then we still have the issue of, will they go read it? Or do we also then, put it in an email and also post it on Facebook? Like, how do we start to
the thing is,
get information out there?
It's content media planning strategies, which involve social media strategies as well. So once we've got it up and running, as I said, at the back end of it, we can actually develop some content and some social media strategies in order to do that. So that would take care of that bit, so that would be fine. But as I said, I'm not expecting anyone to sign up. And as I said, if people who want to, they can. They'd be more than welcome. But as I said, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, which I'm fine with. But there's going to be the projects in the open so they can actually see, and other stuff will be in the open. What we want them to see, what everyone to see, will be in the open, so they can read it without having to join or anything. As I said, I don't, and then if they get inspired and if they're interested, there's plenty of space for them if they want to. You know what I mean? So. Yeah,
Right.
so
And I think that's the advantage over the Enact tool. Was when I built the Enact tool, it was built around project owners signing up and sort of managing their pages, and people weren't doing that, so there's no information. And I think the Drupal tool that you're creating, the advantage is that if you're willing to do the work to sort of like manage the projects and get and keep enough content in there to keep it interesting, to the point where some people are starting to use it as project participants and other people are starting to use it as project owners. I think that's really where the Enact tool fell flat, was it just didn't get actual users, which is a pretty important part of the project.
Well, the thing is, right, I see myself as a community steward, right? I'm not in charge. It's not just all about me. And basically, so say like for the project listing being the public, right? The research into collaboration tools, put that out there, findings and stuff like that. And things that people will find useful, like as I said, make that all in the open. And I may have a thing like buy us a coffee or something on the list, whatever. But if they find it useful, but as I said, but having information like the collaboration tools and maybe if we go in depth and as I said, content and media and social strategies and community building strategies, we can make all that information open. So anyone with a project who's maybe thinking about it, and as I said, if they want to come and join us for some solidarity and some, what I mean, as I said, the more we are together, and as long as they see it that we're not trying to take their project off them, like they're free to, have your own projects, but also if you can think of something that we haven't thought of, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of help each other out, kind of to big tent, like a circus tent, really.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with that. I guess just the thing was that didn't seem to like answer what Jubilee asked. So I was just wanted to make sure we.
And I'm also much more okay waiting for the Drupal tool than whenever we were doing that. It was like years and like eventually we'll get to create this. I don't have the need for volunteers at the moment. So it's more for the sense making projects, like when you guys do need your army of data entry, and it might be ready by then. And then we can together figure out a social media strategy to like once we have somewhere people can sign up, we can all tweet in Facebook like, hey, want to come save the world? Like actually put hours to your vision. Come be part of this if you care about politics. Come be part of this if you care about science.
And like, I think in the short term, anytime we want to do a volunteers needed, I wouldn't want. There's been some people that like post their weekly meetings, and I wouldn't want that to be like a weekly post from everybody where they all ask, "Hey, come join my meeting." But so maybe a weekly post that if you need volunteers. Separate from the, I mean that we asked for help in the weekly update, but someone who's volunteering, I mean, really they should check that, but I don't know that they do. Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know. What do y'all think?
I think we're probably good with what we're doing right now. I was going to say, it's like, it feels frustrating because we've been doing it like week after week with just the 5 of us, but I'm also like, right, a year ago, there weren't the 5 of us. I mean, I knew Adriel, we go way back, but like besides that, right? Like I felt very alone in this for years. And it's like, hey, if there's 5 of us and we're like dedicated, yes, we're not working on one project besides Together Tech, of course, but like there's something very powerful happening that I have less stress about all of these tools not being in existence because the people are coming together. And although we need both, the people are more important. Tools without people are fucking shit. Whereas people without tools, we can still do it. We can figure it out.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. So we have, 12 minutes left? 13 minutes left?
Is that enough time to get into your thing, Bentley?
I don't know. We could start, see how it goes. Of course, I don't know where to start with it.
So one of my main questions when I was trying to figure out sort of how or if WikiElection can tie in is what sort of evidence are we considering and what does that look like?
Well, from the system standpoint, it wouldn't matter. So anything anyone considers evidence. So if you
right, so I guess like what are some lists that we can use to populate that? Because for example, I had the idea for WikiElection for a long time, like, oh, it's going to be evidence-based. And then I actually went to go look for evidence, and I'm like, oh, it's not all that. Like, it's available, but it's weird and piecemeal. And then there's the other side of what do people actually trust?
Well, no, but see, you're not. So I would flip it around and say that you're not looking for evidence that people trust. You're allowing people to say, this is why I believe this. And then they put in their evidence, and then other people can come in and put in their evidence. So there's not a category for evidence. Evidence is anything anyone thinks is evidence, and you just link out to it. And then people can then discuss and debate that evidence. So there's no pre-population needed or categorization in my mind, because I don't care whether it's a video or a text. It's just a hyperlink.
Right. So if we're talking specifically about voting with your wallet, right? So let's say like, what's an example of like it? And this question is, I guess, for anyone, more like as a consumer, for somebody that wants to use the site. If you were trying to shop for, I don't know, bread, and it was saying like, hey, here's 3 companies, and it's saying this company's great and that company sucks. If you were like brand new to the site and you wanted to dig a bit deeper, what would the evidence look like, or what sort of evidence would you either be like, oh, I don't trust it, or like, oh, that's perfect? For something like, that company's great for paying their staff. Mm-hmm. For example, like, I'm not sure what the evidence would look like. Would that just be a bunch of staff that are willing to go on record saying that they pay me $10 an hour? Or would it actually be like something available in that country?
Let's kind of step through the user journey. So you come to the site. Let's say you're trying to figure out where you're going to buy your daily coffee, right? So that's something you buy consistently, right? So you might just go to the site and type in coffee, and then you would say, well, here's our top several. Now, of course, the coffee may not be in your area, so then you may want to narrow it down to say where you live, and then it would filter down to that. And then it would say, well, here's our general ratings of the companies, like, there's top 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then here's kind of why. And it would say, well, this one, there was a news, this lower one's lower because there was a news article saying that their employees weren't there. Or we can even take the Starbucks issue. So, like, let's say, are they sensitive to the racial issues in the United States? And there was that news article where the police were called on him, and he was, I can't remember specifically what went on. So someone might say, oh, they're not good with social activism because of that. And then someone might come back and say, oh, well, they shut down for 2 days a week later and retrained all their staff on cultural sensitivity and stuff like that. So those 2 pieces of evidence would be put in. So, if there is no evidence whether they're good or bad, I don't think there's anything we can do about that. But where there is evidence, now, if you're going in and you're looking at those coffee things, and you can see some of the categories are like, we rate this company high on social, but low on environmentalism, right? Then you can then say, oh, well, social is more important to me than environmentalism, so I can like hit a button that says this is more important to me, and then the list would then resort to show who's on top. So that's the way I kind of envision
Okay.
it.
So it sounds like for the end user, one of the lowest levels of sort of like pieces of evidence are the various news articles talking about something, right? So you got for Starbucks, here's 10 news articles talking about that situation where like I was like a barista called the cops on a black guy who was just waiting in a Starbucks for just being black and waiting, I guess.
Right.
And then, yes, Starbucks had a bunch of stories written about that there was the blowback. And then there was a bunch of stories written about how, hey, Starbucks shut down for a couple of days and the various kinds of sensitivity training. And so that, and I actually think that's one of the better sources that we have right now are those kind of news articles, and then sort of grouping them together to say, hey, here's something that 100 different outlets wrote about. Here's the 100, here's the 100 articles that were written, and here's that one thing that they wrote about. And there's the other thing where it was, okay, that's the incident, and then there's the, what they did about it. And so there's these two separate things backed up by a bunch of news articles.
Right. But also someone could go in and look at their quarterly earnings statements and say, with the amount of money they're earning, and maybe somewhere in the statements they say what their average pay is for a barista, they might say that's inappropriate. And so that could be evidence, right? So that's not a news article, but it's a link. It's an internet link. And maybe you post some videos of the CEO on CNN saying something about lying about their company and stuff like that, or the what snippets from the Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress, right? So all those things would be kind of like evidence, and you could say what feature that's affecting, and then people can kind of debate whether it should or should not affect it and how much it should affect it. That's my thought. Now, I think a lot of people may not be willing to put in that level of information. So I imagine there would need to be, I would rather not have it, but I think we'll need to have just a popularity option. So you can go and say, oh, I don't really like Starbucks. And then you say, oh, well, tell us why you like it. Is it because they're socially responsible? Is it because they, so then you could rate each individual thing. And then when you rate them, maybe say, oh, do you have any evidence other than what we already have? And you could show some, if someone's already posted news articles, here what they have, are we missing anything? Especially if their ratings differ from a majority of other people, then you could say, what's a reason why you have that? So you just kind of slowly bring them deeper into it if they're willing to. And then we can talk about how the system can be abused and figure that out. But that's the general idea.
Yeah, and I think that last part, no matter what, it has to go through a phase where it gets abused. And we just, kind of try to keep it mostly silent while we're trying to figure that part out, and don't publicize the outcome too much, where we're like, hey, we started to collect this, here's the prototype, but yeah, it's fully able to be gamed right now, and we're aware of that.
So do you see that flow also working for Wiki Election? And even whether you have your professionals, but a public thing that comes in, let them just say what they like about their candidates, and then another way to put evidence on why they think the candidates are that way, or does that not work?
To an extent, that's how it works. My goal is to sort of take the individual opinion. I really only want at the level of I have an opinion on what this piece of evidence means, and sort of the outcome that people are saying that this evidence means X, is that true or not? And then what's your either your track record, if you've said that these 20 past instances I like that and didn't like that, do you tend to agree with the experts or not? Are you qualified in other ways? But very little about trying to get an aggregate of somebody posting a comment, and it's, I guess, starting from the evidence and then trying to figure out how to review it, and then how to group it into various things. And for that, I use the events. I talked about where for Starbucks, you've got here's the event of the cops being called. Here's the event of the training afterwards, and then the community would then sort of score those events. And then you can also do scoring on the events for people said that this wasn't good, but it also only had one news article written about it, so we're not 100% sure what's actually happening. And then you get deep into what news outlets published that. If there's 5 articles, but they're all written by maybe less than reputable outlets, how do you judge that? But in Wiki Election, it really all starts from the evidence, and then you start to group it and score it and review it and so on. And that's...
So the feature I didn't have on my list yet that you mentioned was, or the big one was, experts.
Yeah.
And then there were some other nuances in there. So we'd have to see whether those nuances, I think the experts would happen in all these things, because if you have someone who's knows nutritional science, then if they're including that that chemical in their food in the ingredients list, then that could be something that's important. And of course, for the food piece, the ingredients list is something that doesn't quite fit with everything else. I mean, maybe that's just called an evidence, and maybe we can just shoehorn that into the same structure and then give it a different name on that site.
Yeah, I mean, this
I
is
haven't quite thought through all those.
kind of where hyperlogos would be useful, where it's like you might have a section that has the evidence about the individual ingredients. It's sort of like, okay, so if you're saying that aspartame is healthy or not, great, then what are all the studies underlying that? So anytime aspartame comes up, you've got this underlying beta of information about that one ingredient that if you're referencing it in a like, oh, okay, I'm not as concerned about the company. I just want to make sure I'm eating something that's healthy. Okay, great. Here's, from what you've said and the kinds of sources that you trust and don't trust, here's how the evidence currently boils down. And based on the evidence for aspartame, the community has shown that it's either safe or not safe, or, it's safe to eat, but don't inject it, or however that information is actually split out.
So the question comes down to, is all these little nuances for each community and each project going to be so different from the other ones that how much code is actually going to be able to be shared, right?
Right.
So that would be part of the architecture, and maybe in the first couple of things, maybe experts won't be in it, or maybe the ingredients won't be in it on the food one, although that's pretty core to it. But so I think we kind of have to map out the feature requirements and then seeing, even though the names will differ, the core data structures, if they're similar enough, it may not matter whether it's an ingredient or a feature for a website, but maybe it does. So
yeah, I'm wondering what. I guess this is mostly a question for Bentley and Matoush, but like take something like the vote with your wallet thing, build sort of like the really popsicle sticks and glue prototype that like we're that I'm effectively working with Matoush to build for WikiElection, knowing that that's not going to be long-term. I'm making a bunch of design choices that aren't great for the long-term and that won't handle certain situations, but just to get a vibe for it and see like what works and any glaring issues. And in the case of WikiElection, it's focusing on politics and that. In the case of Conferati, it's focusing on sort of organizations and the same type of history that would be available. I wonder if the end goal is to start with that level of prototype for something like Vote with Your Wallet. Don't worry about trying to tie them together at all, and then meet up, in 3 months and see what we have in common. And start to like once it's starting to do stuff, and then we say, oh, they overlap great here, not so great there, and then we can talk about the pros and cons of each. And could we overlap, or should they keep on their
I think
different paths?
We're running out of time, but my almost feeling is, because when things when they're designed kind of separately like that, you tend to make naming conventions and concepts that are different enough that it'd be really hard to recombine them in the end. But if you say everyone's going to want to have an entity that they vote on and attributes of those entities that they vote on, all of them do have that piece, the evidence and the that sort of thing. I don't know. We got to look at that. That maybe just building out that piece and using it in all three. That would be my preferred path.
Right. I see. So like have sort of a pre-planning prior to the prototype so that we're at least more set up to follow the same general structure. And then knowing that we'll still add things onto our prototypes that might be unique, but at least, like you're starting from people and organizations and positions and the general structure of like, so we're talking the same language for if we're trying to look at what person worked where and who donated what, that there's hopefully some
I think there
similarity.
is a core of shared functionality that's obviously shared. Yeah. And then there's the more stuff that we might want to figure out how to work together. So I'd like to work on that core a little bit first.
Okay.
I really wonder, and I know you guys were at the end, but like if an event happens and it's newsworthy and then everyone covers it, that gets a high score. But if something's newsworthy and no one covers it, because that's what happens in the media, right? There's a protest that like crickets, nobody looked at it. No news source picked it up, but there's hundreds of people with cell phones, right? It's the difference. And that is partly like my focus of starting with the ground base of the people, but we don't have 10,000 people. So that would be ridiculous for you guys to stop your projects waiting for 10,000 people. That like, how how the average person gets their information on food and how you're going to trust it and how you get your information on politicians, because they're very different. Like science, I don't want news articles. I want it back to the scientific article. Politicians, there's no scientific article. Was it covered in the news and was it spoken at, like actually recorded and spoken in the votes and stuff. So it's like back to the evidence. Like none of the evidence would I trust would be like, well, this was covered 500 times in the news, because I already, the news, that's what we're fixing. Like it's already that like the amount of times it's covered in the news is not the same as the amount of times that a peer-reviewed article has sourced another one or vice. And even that's broken. But like the bigger picture of that is like, well, yeah, I can link to that. First of all, that Starbucks guy, Starbucks didn't say go kick him out. An employee said, I'm going to go kick him out. And the Starbucks response didn't fire that employee. They're like, we're going to have training for everyone. Like, it's like, well, did Starbucks do wrong? I don't know. Starbucks do right? Yeah. Like, it's like, but as a society, we focus on, no, Starbucks kicked the guy out and then Starbucks whitewashed.
Well, right. But in the system is the ability to rate the evidence and debate it. So nowhere would we say, oh, the frequency of new articles have any bearing on it. Or we would say, we will trust studies more than others. That will come out of the wash because the system says you could link anything. So like you said, no news coverage. Well, there's YouTube videos, so you link a YouTube video.
Yeah.
So it's unrelated to the media. The media just happens to be one of the sources.
Totally. And I think for something like the protests, you're going to end up with a huge amount of both. And a lot of them won't agree with each other. And then that's where the review of if you had an article about the Black Lives Matter protests in the US, you would end up with 1,000 news articles and 500,000 YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so now you kind of go through it and find the common findings, and you have some people go through and start to flag out okay, I'm just going to pull out with no context, just the instances of police brutality. Then you're going to have somebody else go in and pull out just the rioters doing bad things. And then if everyone's doing it with the same source, you can start to be like, oh, okay, here's what the different sides are doing. And then you can pull it back and say like, okay, now let's add some context to those videos. And let's start to see what numbers are we talking about. Because if there's, 10 of this and, 10 instances of police brutality and 10 rioters and 1 million protesters, like, oh, maybe the extremes aren't actually driving this conversation despite what people are saying. Or if one, is 10% and one is 1%, you're like, oh, one side is obviously clearly worse here.
But if, like, even in the riots, and I agree that those numbers probably showcase very heavily one way, that actually, no, it helps both sides. That, like, you don't know the cops are the cops when they're committing police brutality. You don't know protesters are protesters when they're committing the violence, right? So how do I know that was a cop and not just somebody who wanted you to think cops are having police brutality? That's less likely to happen because there's a much higher legal precedent than the cops getting in all black, right? And being like, we'll just smash some windows and start some fires that everyone else does. That it happened and there was one incident and a human being started this fire. Now, how do we know whether they're, this or that? And that's part of, for me, any sense-making tool is owning that. Well, we don't know how to own that.
Right.
Like, we know what's going on in the protests. We know they're happening, maybe, because the media is not covering them as much as they could. If there's something there, but we're like 3 minutes past. Should we end this or should we continue recording?
I think we need to end it.
Yeah, I think we can end it.
All right.
Put
Thanks.
it out of its misery.
Thanks, people, for showing up for the 2 p.m. one, the same people.